Escort girls of Reddit, have you ever been caught by the client's SO? How did that go? When I was 20, I was alone in London, needed cash, and didn't have much of a chance to get other jobs because of the recession. I had a friend that had been doing the work, so I thought, what the hell? It was maybe my fourth job. I was sent as an outcall to a hotel on Park Lane by the agency. Apparently, it's a well-known customer, and he wants me to dress in a long coat and heels. I was also told that I need to be discreet. Whatever. I turned up, went up to the 8th floor, and knocked on the door. He opens, shushes me, and brings me in. He gave me my gift and proceeded to lie in bed. He whispered and said that he wants me to get under the covers and give him a BJ. Okay, no problem. He covered me with the duvet, and I went on. I could feel he was getting close when I heard a door open. Oh crap, I thought. I was panicking. He pushed my head down, and I heard an Arabic woman's voice. She was talking to him and shouting, and he was shouting back, still holding me down there. I found it kind of funny and was enjoying the situation. 30 seconds later, she whipped the cover off, and she was looking at me directly in the face. She was visibly angry. He was clearly enjoying it and sprayed the juice all over himself, laughing. She was screaming again. So needless to say, I grabbed my clothes and get out of there ASAP. I could hear her screaming at him and him laughing as I was running down the hall. 10 out of 10, one of the funniest experiences. 10 out of 10 would not do it again. Story 2. Several years ago, I started university, and to make some extra money, began working on a site. I ended up doing it about 4 nights a week and made a decent amount, especially from a group of regular clients who would pay for private sessions. One client in particular was very generous, tipping me between 50 and 75 euros per session, which lasted about 2 hours, and he booked me weekly, or sometimes bi-weekly. At one point, he made a genuinely sweet offer. He suggested we meet in person with no strings attached, and he would pay me 1,000 euros. After thinking it over and asking my best friend for advice, who was aware of what I did, she said she'd come with me for security and to make sure I had fun. So, I told my client, and he was fine with it. My friend would stay in the living room while my client and I went to the bedroom to play, which, honestly, was pretty amazing of her. Long story short, we arrived at his house, which was nice but not overly large, with the bedroom directly above the entrance. My client greeted us, was super polite, and paid everything up front to my friend. He even got us drinks and showed my friend how to work the TV. I didn't see any pictures around, but I got the sense he wasn't living the single life. I didn't think much of it though. So, my client and I go upstairs and start being intimate. He was good, and things were getting pretty heated when we didn't realize the front door had opened. My client started to feel something was wrong when he heard shouting downstairs. He peeked out the window, and I heard my friend explaining things to what I assumed was his wife. My client quickly got dressed and rushed downstairs, with me following behind, and loudly declared that we were the new neighbors. He said I wasn't feeling well, so he took me upstairs to rest. I saw my friend trying to keep it together as she pretended to be concerned, asking if I was okay. I just nodded silently because, honestly, the situation was so absurd, I had to fight not to laugh. My friend hurried me out the door as quickly as she could. I'm pretty sure his wife didn't buy our story, but we didn't stick around to find out since she was yelling at her husband. That was the last I saw of him. He never visited my cam room again as far as I know. For a while, I felt guilty about his wife, and part of me still does. At the same time, I don't think I did anything wrong, but that was the only time I met a client in person or been intimate for money. The situation itself was ridiculous, and while it was a strange experience, I can't say it was the most pleasant towards the end. I do wonder what happened to him, but I'm not about to reach out to find out for obvious reasons. Story 3. During my university years, I did some escorting to help with finances. It wasn't something serious, and I wasn't strict about pricing, so my clients ranged from yacht dealers to factory workers. One of my regulars was an investment banker who I saw about 3 times a month. Over time, it seemed to get more romantic for him. He'd share personal details about his life, his children, and his goals, things you would typically share with a spouse. He even asked me for advice about his daughter's rebellious behavior and wondered if I could offer some mentorship. I thought, how sweet. One day, he invited me to his home since his wife was out of town. I agreed, and when I arrived, the house was beautiful. Pictures of his family everywhere, white carpets, a games room. While giving me a tour, we passed his daughter's room, and he suddenly started kissing me. He threw my innards onto a collection of stuffed animals. It was really gross. Then we headed to his bedroom. We were in the middle of intimate activity when we heard the front door open. It was his wife. For context, I'm black, and both he and his wife are middle-class white people. She walked in, took off her heels, removed her earrings, and no joke, just asked me to leave. She wasn't angry or upset, just calmly told me I should go. I left without my inners and had to find my own way home. Story 4. I had a very close friend who worked as an escort for a while. She met a man and they really hit it off. He'd even show her pictures of his wife and kids. Eventually, the man came up with the idea of setting up a meeting at a bar between my friend and his wife. The plan was for my friend to seduce the wife, and then they'd have a three-way tango, fulfilling all of the guy's fantasies. It frigging worked. Not only did it work, but my friend ended up becoming a long-term mistress to both of them and started nannying their children. You seriously can't make this stuff up. Edit. Alright, I guess I could make this up, but I'm not. For anyone asking about the guy's income, I don't know for sure, but I do know he paid for her to get braces, covered a few semesters at State University, and last I heard, got her a pretty nice car. I'd be lying if I said I never considered this as a possible career path for myself. Story 5. Not a significant other. It was worse. I'd been talking to a potential client for about a month. He had great reviews and wanted me to come over for a midnight 1-hour house call. A friend was having a party nearby, so I figured I could swing by the party, sneak out for the appointment, and then head back. I'm usually not a fan of house calls. I prefer hotels, but his reviews were solid, and I was told he was young. I arrived at a dark house, already feeling skeptical. I texted him to let him know I was there. He opened the door and sure enough, a nice young guy, slightly awkward but no red flags. He greeted me quietly and led me into the kitchen. I noticed a woman's handbag on the counter and assumed we were being quiet because of roommates. Then, from upstairs, I hear a voice, a shrill, nagging screech that seemed more at home in a reality TV show. Is there a frigging light on downstairs? What are you doing? Get the F to bed. It was his mother. This guy had invited me over while his mom was home. He took me upstairs. The lights were off, and I tripped and fell against a door, which swung open, revealing a woman's bedroom. Frilly bedcovers. His mom was lying in bed, and thank God, she couldn't see who was at the door. What the F are you doing? She screamed. I quickly shut the door as he pulled me into his room. To be honest, I wasn't sure what I was doing there either. I almost wanted to just run out screaming, but I'd already gone through the effort of getting ready and was hoping for some cash. We whispered awkwardly, as he suggested a cringe-worthy roleplay. He also asked me to let him finish on my glasses, and then lick it off. Fine, whatever, just don't get it in my hair. I tried to stay silent, terrified his mom would barge in at any second. He did finish on my glasses, and of course some got in my eye. When I got dressed and was preparing to leave, he turned off the bedroom light and opened the door. His mom woke up again. I scrambled into the corner and tried to hide behind his wardrobe, but the drawers at the bottom of it made it impossible. So, I just curled up behind the bed and prayed to the hooker gods while she berated him for what felt like an eternity. I seriously considered jumping out the window because, honestly, a broken ankle seemed preferable to getting caught by his mom. I also couldn't see properly because of his sauce in my eye, and being hunched in that position was unbearable. It was like something out of Jurassic Park, hiding from the raptors. That's how terrified I felt. Finally, she retreated, and I snuck downstairs, out the door, and ran for dear life. And the cherry on top? He texted me afterward asking when he could see me again, this time at 2 a.m. Story 6. I got a call from an unknown number while I was working on my laptop. Curious, I typed the number into Google and hit enter. This was before Google started restricting phone number searches. When the page didn't load right away, I just answered the call. It turned out to be a tech from work who needed help accessing one of my systems. I walked him through it, then went back to my laptop. The first search result for his phone number was a Craigslist ad for gay, erotic massage. And it wasn't a mistake. The ad had been up for a few months, and though there were no photos of his face, his unusually hairy arms and a small tattoo made it easy to recognize him. I kept the story to myself for years, only sharing it after I left the company. One night, I told the story at a bar with some old coworkers. not realizing that one of them was friends with this guy's wife. Yeah, my bad. Story 7. 2 wives of clients found out about me because their husbands straight up told them, under the misguided belief that once they were divorced, we'd be free to have an unpaid relationship. The first time it happened, I was flattered, conflicted, and a bit sad. The second time, I was just angry. You threw away your happy home life because you hoped some college girl was going to ride off into the sunset with you? Now I only book 2-hour sessions. I've found that clients who book overnight or full-day sessions are the ones most likely to lose touch with reality. Somehow, sleeping next to someone feels more intimate than doing it with them, and it leaves these men confused. Story 8. Former adult phone operator here. I was on a call with a guy when someone picked up the other line. It was his elderly, disabled mother, and she needed help getting out of bed. I told him to go help her, and we could talk later. His mom thought I was his girlfriend, and was so excited at the idea that her son had a real, flesh and blood girlfriend. She even told him to finish talking to me, and that she could wait. I ended up hanging up because, frankly, I wasn't paid enough to deal with that. It was a bit sad, though, seeing how thrilled she was at the idea of him having a girlfriend. I never heard from him again. Another caller hated his wife and wanted to be feminized, while ranting about how much of a bitch she was and how disgusted she would be by his sissy desires. He got caught talking to me while literally hiding in the closet. I overheard his wife asking, "What are you doing in there?" He yelled back that he was organizing the winter coats, hurriedly zipped up his pants, and hung up on me. The same guy once tried to send me $500 in gift cards, but the credit card company called him to confirm the charge, and his wife picked up. He somehow managed to talk his way out of that one too. Story 9. At the club where I worked, one of the dancers had a daddy who came in almost every day. He was actually good-looking and charming. One day, his wife saw his car in the parking lot, drove in, and rushed past the bouncers straight into the VIP area. They were back there, and it was a close call, only seconds away from being caught. She didn't get her tip that day, so out of guilt, he tripled it the next time he came in. Story 10. When I was working, I had some regular clients come during that time. One of them lived in another country and worked in a different province, but he was still a very good client. He told me he was separated from his wife, but when he went back to his place, she found my number and called me. She asked who I was, how often I saw him, and a lot of other questions. The conversation went as well as it could, with her yelling and him begging me not to say anything. I don't really remember how it ended, but after all of that, he continued to be one of my clients. Story 11. I used to practically run an agency here in the UK. I started as a driver, then moved on to covering phones, conducting interviews, doing photography, and maintaining the website. There were 2 incidents where girls got caught by their spouses, but one stands out more than the other. We had a regular client who would book a girl for 3 hours a few times a month while his significant other was on night shifts. I'm not sure why she came back, but one night around 1 a.m., she pulled up outside with an hour still left on the appointment. As she walked toward the door, I recognized who she must have been, so I got out of my car to hang around when I knew things were about to get messy. Our policy was that drivers would never leave the girls alone for safety, which helped them feel secure. So, the significant other walks in. I hear a lot of shouting and head toward the front door. The girl bursts through the door wearing nothing but lingerie. We rush to the car and start heading back home, about 30 miles away, but after about 10 miles, she realizes she forgot her bag. Guess who had to turn back for it? I arrived, and the police are there. I knock on the door, and I have to explain myself to the officers. They hand over her bag and clothes and take my details in case they need a statement. They let me take her home, and that was the end of it. The client never booked again, and I have no idea what happened to them. The police never contacted either of us. I can only assume the neighbors called them because of the arguing. Story 12. When I was working, I had a client who was one of my favorites. He was an older guy, working in construction, and he was into a little unconventional stuff. Pretty common in our world and easy money. For his 60th birthday, he wanted to try his backdoor. It wasn't something I'd offer to just anyone, but we had good chemistry, and the idea intrigued me. So I went ahead and made him do things under my control for the evening. He loved it, and afterward, we had a great conversation about how liberating the experience was for him. He talked about how, as he got older, he wanted to try new things and how he wished his wife could be more adventurous with him. That's not an uncommon conversation for me. What was unusual, though, was that he apparently told his wife. I got an angry email from her telling me to stay away from her man. I didn't respond, and I never heard from him again. I hope they work things out. Story 13. Third-party story incoming. I knew someone whose boyfriend started seeing escorts. His girlfriend noticed missing hours in his schedule. He'd lie about being with friends or where he had been. At first, I thought she was just being paranoid and clingy, but she finally snapped when a group photo from a work event popped up on Facebook, and he wasn't in it. She asked around and found out he wasn't actually at the after-work event, despite saying he was. So, being the logical person she is, she decided to hide her phone in his car. She tracked it from her house once he finished work and suspected he was up to no good. She saw her phone's location showing an expensive apartment building where his car was parked. She went there, smashed his car window, grabbed her phone, and called him with it. I'm not sure what happened after that, but apparently, he had white powder all over his face. Needless to say, they're not together anymore. Edit. In her version of the story, she mentioned that he had white powder all over his face. I can't confirm what kind of powder it was or how much was on his face. Could have just been nostril crust. Story 14. This happened to a close friend of mine. His wife had taken their teenage daughter hiking for the day, and he thought he'd have some company over. Unfortunately, the daughter got sick, and they returned much earlier than expected. She walked in on her husband being led around like a dog. As you can imagine, things didn't go well. They divorced last year. The daughter went to my school, but left town after all that happened. Edit. Just to clarify, I'm a teacher and the daughter attended my school. Sorry for any confusion. Story 15. I've been working in clubs for years, and out of the hundreds of times I've given out my number, only once has a wife ever called me. She was initially furious. Her husband had been sent to rehab for alcohol and drugs, wasn't working, and she was the breadwinner. He'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars partying, and his phone was full of numbers for hookers, strippers, and random women he'd been sleeping with. She was planning to call everyone in his contact list. My name starts with Yo Mama, so I'm not sure how far she got down the list. She asked me why I was working in a club, and I explained it was for college and whatnot. She wasn't mad at me, but she was really angry with him. She even promised to visit me sometime. It was crazy. She asked how much he gave me, and it wasn't much, just a $100 bill for a $20 dance. His friends were also tipping me, so I figured I'd stay in touch with them. I used the money to buy a couple of school books the next day, which she was fine with. Smartphones keep getting smarter, making it easier to hide things, but people who constantly lie can't keep it up forever. Story 16. I used to work the front desk at a high-end hotel. Here's one of my classics. An older couple, probably in their early 60s, walks in arguing. They asked to check into their room, so we do everything for them and bring them up to their room. About 30 minutes later, the guy comes back downstairs and says, "Screw it, give me another room. I'm not sleeping with that bish. And while you're at it, find me an escort." We told him that it was illegal and we couldn't refer one to him. But if he checked the last page of this newspaper, a local guide, he might find what he was looking for. We set him up with a second room and off he went. Shift change happens, and my front desk agent goes home while an intern takes over for the night. A woman walks in, clearly an escort. After 2 years of night shifts, we can spot most of you from a mile away. To those who are nice and don't give us that "I'm a rich guest" attitude, we appreciate it seriously. It might help you out in the future. But the intern didn't pick up on it. When she asked for Mr. Smith's room, the intern found 2 rooms in the system and just gave her one. Big mistake. Front desk never gives out room numbers. 15 minutes later, I'm in the back office, and I hear the elevator bell followed by a woman screaming, "Where is that frigging a-hole? He's going to hear about this." My brain clicked, and when I walked out, I found the wife dragging the escort by the hand, demanding the room number of her husband. Yep, the intern had sent her to the wrong room. When Mrs. Smith answered the door, the escort said something along the lines of, "Oh, Mr. Smith didn't specify it was for more than one person." Mrs. Smith immediately put it together. We checked Mr. Smith into a neighboring hotel that same night. He was not too happy about it. Story 17. I had a friend who wasn't discovered until a few months after his death. To keep it short, we met in school, and he went on to become a successful lawyer for a company out west. He married a beautiful woman and had 2 healthy kids. About 6 years ago, he suddenly went blind. It happened out of nowhere. They went to the doctor, and it turned out he'd eaten meat tainted with mad cow disease. His health rapidly deteriorated, and he passed away. His friends and family were devastated, completely shocked. His wife put away all his belongings and waited an entire year before she could bring herself to go through them. At the time, the iPhone was still new, and their son asked if he could have his dad's phone. She was hesitant but eventually took it out of storage, charged it, and found that the phone was filled with pictures, texts, and emails from a high-end escort service. Some of the emails were recent, asking where he was or why they hadn't heard from him. This discovery took her down a very dark path, and it brought a whole new set of issues to his family. The last I heard, she had spent all the insurance money from his death on plastic surgery, getting bolt-ons, and other procedures. Story 18. I've been caught, but not directly. My client told his wife about me, and she sent me a polite email asking if we could meet. Since I work with high-end clients, I wasn't concerned about her causing a scene in public. They had been married for 40 years, but had grown apart. No intimacy, just close friends and roommates. Divorce wasn't on the table for them. She was more curious than anything else. She had always felt repressed and wanted to try being with a woman. I'm a safe choice, and since I'm also someone who appreciates women, I decided to make that interaction a gift. They were both good-looking. I tend to prefer older couples, and it turned out to be one of the oddest experiences I've had. In the end, her meeting with me somehow rekindled their marriage. Now they book me once a month together. Story 19. I used to post ads on Craigslist looking for men, often with suggestive titles, to help those interested feel more comfortable with their identities. One day, I received a message from a man who said he'd be generous if I could spend some intimate time with him. After exchanging messages for several hours, I agreed to meet him at a motel. He was about 32 years old, married with kids. When I arrived at the motel, I was surprised to find his wife there instead of him. I knocked on the door in the sequence I was given, and she opened it. The look on her face said it all. She didn't seem to realize who I was until I was standing right there. She confronted me, expressing anger and calling me a homewrecker, which was a bit uncomfortable, but not as bad as it could have been. I did offer to perform for her as I was already there, but she didn't take me up on it, although she did seem to consider it for a moment. Story 20. I was the client. Backstory. I married young at 20 and came from a very conservative background. I struggled with selfish behaviors and developed an addiction to physical intimacy. For the first 8 years of my marriage, I frequented escorts and clubs regularly. My partner had no idea, and I led a double life. The relevant part of the story is that I became emotionally attached to the last girl I saw. We had shared interests and even some mutual acquaintances. I began to entertain the idea of leaving my spouse to be with her. I despised myself for what I was doing and felt I deserved to be with someone like her, someone deep in addiction. Eventually, I couldn't handle the weight of my addiction and the pain I was causing my spouse. I came clean. My partner was devastated. She wanted to know everything and went through my phone, discovering the contact information of the girl. She texted her to verify my story and learned about her struggles with addiction. My spouse, being incredibly understanding, offered to help her in any way she could, and they had sporadic contact over the next few months. My spouse never blamed the girl and actually felt sympathy for her. The girl eventually got help and left the business, as far as I know. Unfortunately, my marriage eventually deteriorated, and we separated. That was the turning point for me to finally seek help for myself. After a lot of therapy and self-reflection, my spouse eventually agreed to let me back into her life. It's been a difficult road with trust issues, anger, and hurt. But we've worked through it. The scars I created will likely never fully heal, and I must live with that guilt. I am doing everything I can to make it right because my partner is worth it. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary. Story 21. My uncle has worked as a gay escort for several years, finding clients through online ads. He did this regularly for about 5 years before getting caught in a sting operation. Afterward, he enrolled in massage school and became a licensed massage therapist, though he still occasionally provides adult services to established clients. Over the years, he's had a few wives reach out to him, either by phone or email, asking if he's been involved with their husbands. If he answers, he usually either doesn't respond or denies knowing their husband. This approach seems to work for him in terms of keeping his business discreet. While I can't recall any specific names, some of his clients have included married men in prominent positions, including conservative state representatives. Recently, he's been involved with a wealthy man and his girlfriend, meeting with the man privately, without the girlfriend's knowledge. The girlfriend later found my uncle's online profile under a fake name and saw that he identifies as gay, which caused her to confront him. As much as I try not to judge my uncle for his lifestyle, since he's family and I care about him, the situation with married men is difficult for me to reconcile, especially as a straight, married woman. I understand that societal pressures may push some men to hide their sexuality, but it still feels wrong to me that many of them choose to marry women and secretly engage with men behind their wives' backs. Story 22. A friend of my ex-girlfriend had a Russian acquaintance who once ran a house of ill repute. One of their regular clients would visit once a month, always booking ahead and requesting the same girl. He wasn't the nicest guy, but he paid double for rougher treatment. One day, this client called in for his usual appointment, and she penciled him in. Later, one of her newer employees called in sick again. This girl was known for being rude to clients and rarely showed up to work. Annoyed, the manager called the girl back and told her that if she didn't show up this time, she'd be let go. To her surprise, when she checked the number on the caller ID, it was the same as the regular client's number. Curious, she called the girl back and, although understanding, insisted she come in on Friday or she'd be out. On Friday, the client arrived, and she directed him to the room. She then told the new girl that her client was waiting inside. The girl went into the room, and moments later, the guy ran out barefoot, desperately holding his jeans up, while the girl followed, beating him with a riding crop. Apparently, the guy never returned, and the girl picked up her clothes half an hour later, never to be seen again. The image of the girl in thigh-high latex boots chasing him down the street, whipping him as he ran in a panic, became one of the most memorable stories. As the manager put it, I haven't laughed like that since I was a little girl. It was just too funny. Story 23. A few years ago, a friend of mine found a list of escort contacts in her husband's phone. When she confronted him about it, he denied knowing how they got there. This wasn't the first time he'd crossed boundaries, so she filed for divorce. Despite being the primary earner as a successful professional, and despite him spending thousands of her money on escorts, she was shocked to learn that she would still be required to pay alimony in addition to splitting their marital assets. Undeterred, she decided to call the numbers in his phone. After some persistence, she finally got in touch with one of the escorts. She reassured her that she meant no harm and offered to pay her standard rate just for some information. The escort, however, had a better idea. She asked for $2,000 in exchange for a few days' work. A few days later, my friend received a video showing her husband with the escort and her friend. She had her attorney send the video to her husband, along with an offer to settle the divorce outside of court on her terms. In the end, she got the house, both their cars, and all the other assets, and he got the dogs. Story 24. I've been operating under the radar for 15 years and have never been caught. However, a girl I worked with wasn't as lucky. When we showed up at her sugar daddy's house after he'd been busted, the place was a disaster. Every single bottle in his wine cellar, which had about 1,500 bottles, was smashed, along with all the cigars in his humidor. She had also taken down every picture on the walls and destroyed them. There was glass everywhere. She even tore apart his pool table and threw the balls through all the mirrors. Apparently, she was planning to take him to divorce court and get everything, especially since she didn't want the other woman to get a penny of it. I think the bust had something to do with an STD. Story 25. One of my regular clients was unhappily married with 4 kids. He often asked me if he should leave his wife, and I would always tell him yes, if you're going to cheat, you should end it. His wife, a former adult film star, owned a huge international fitness franchise. Both of them were also big fans of Coke. I saw him for about 4 years before he suggested a 3-way with his wife, fueled by powder. The experience was incredibly awkward for me since I wasn't attracted to her body. Afterward, she admitted that she knew he had been seeing me and just wanted to see what he was cheating with. She said she liked me, but I made it clear I wasn't interested in doing it again. I blocked his number, but he continued to message me from different social media accounts. Let me tell you, I knew he was seeing their nanny, had a mistress, and even found out he was also involved with his mistress's little sister. I had no interest in this man ever. However, every time he left, she would blow up my phone, pretend to be someone else on Facebook or Instagram, or otherwise harass me. I felt bad for her, but at the same time I didn't want to get dragged into their drama. Story 26. I used to drive girls in northern Alberta for about 4 years, doing it on and off. These girls made serious money, so much that most people wouldn't believe it if I told them. Anyway, we were in Edson when we got a call to a trailer just outside town. Now, most people staying in trailers in that area are working in the oil patch, and they stay in these high-end fifth wheels. We pull up, and she heads inside. About 10 minutes later, a pickup truck pulled up behind me. It's a woman. At first, I didn't think much of it, since some guys call multiple girls late at night and just take whoever shows up first. But this wasn't another girl. It was his fiancée. She stood there with the door open, staring at the girl and telling her to get out. The guy had already paid $150 for the girl to come over, but he was about to charge $7,000 on his credit card for just an hour. She was understandably furious. 2 hours later, the guy called again, saying his fiancée was leaving soon and he wanted her to come back. He said he'd call once she left, but that call never came. Story 27. I occasionally work as an escort, mostly with cute guys I meet at bars. One day, one of their wives reached out to me, asking if I'd been seeing her husband. At first I lied, but then I mentioned that he had stolen my wallet. She didn't defend him at all. Instead, she said she'd help me look for it. Eventually, I told her everything, but I never directly admitted to any money exchange for my own protection. I kept saying things like it wasn't just for fun, but she didn't seem to pick up on the hint. She eventually asked if money had been exchanged, and I said he paid for a private party. She still didn't seem to get it or was trying to get me to admit it outright. Story 28. I have a third-party story that relates. A friend of mine is in the military, and he was called to duty overseas, serving his country with pride. When he returned, he found out that his partner at the time had started working for SEGs, not for the money but just because she could. She had clients all over the U.S. who would fly her out for intimate encounters. When my friend learned about this, he was devastated and ended things with her. I don't know if she continued doing it, but it seems likely. Just want to take a moment to shout out to all the military members who serve their countries. You do the work that many of us wouldn't, and you deserve much more recognition for it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.